Let's get started. For those who don't know, my name is Christian Ting, and it is my pleasure to introduce a friend of the NSA and the subject of our interview Zoom today, Chris Anderson. Now, Chris is no stranger to the NSA, so this should be a homecoming of sorts, and also a celebration of a lifetime of resilience and tenacity of a person who stutters as an accomplished triathlon athlete. Thanks for making us all feel bad, by the way, Chris. And most recently, as a self-published author. Chris's book, Every Waking Moment, The Journey to Take Back My Life from the Trauma and Stigma of Stuttering, is out now. Chris's book examines his life journey through a lens of self-acceptance from his stutter in his childhood to fatherhood, and provides a path forward for hope and healing for its readers. But more than that, it is an illuminating document about the humanity that resides in all of us in the stuttering community and what realizing our full potential could look like. Chris, we wanted to thank you again for taking time out of your day to chat with us. The question that I had posed is, what goes into making a book, and where did you first start it? Like, was it around like a couple of years back, and how did this entire idea come to fruition?
So I actually started like 10 years ago, but I realized that I was still in the middle of the journey and kind of living the stories that are in the book. And I also was not a great writer yet, or I didn't really know how to write. I wrote long paragraphs and all of that, but about a few years ago, I started to write a story every morning for over a year, until I had kind of the story of my life and what kind of amounted to a draft. And it was all the stories of stuttering and how I experienced them and how they impacted who I was. And I was like, this is exactly what I needed growing up. And I just had an idea to share it, and hope that it helps others.
During my reading of your book, the one thing that struck out to me the most was this sense of structure and this deeply intentional design in terms of how you broke down every chapter, every real era of your life. And, you know, obviously a lot of that organization comes from your time working within the FBI, but I'd like to know, sort of from your opinion, looking back on the completion of the book, which section of this book was the most challenging for you to write, that drew from a very personal place, and which section was maybe surprisingly easy?
I think it was all hard. It was all hard to work through the stories, because they are, you know, heavy. Like there's a lot of emotion and kind of reflection on how they impacted you. And for some reason, I have a really good memory, and I can recall everything that's ever happened to me without kind of having like the influence of, you know, hindsight. So I really took the time to explore like each of the stories in the book, and then it, as you know, the last part of the book is an analysis of how I reached self-acceptance. And I enjoyed that part because it helped me understand like what actually happened to me in the steps that I chose. And it's the part of the book that I like the most, I think, is the third part, in that I realized a lot about the journey in that part, and it wasn't even supposed to be part of the book. Like, I got to the end of my story and I was like, this isn't the end yet. Like, I have to explore the meaning of the stories and all of that. And I hope that that helps to understand, like, the process that it really is to find acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your journey is, again, far from over. You're still quite young, especially as a young father. In part of the book details, a component of your life that was really sprung upon as sort of a response to your stutter, which was your involvement within, like, the Ironman triathletes. And, as someone who is not really in shape, I'd love to know sort of how these competitions were connected to your larger story and your larger framework of resilience. And as a fun question, which one was more stressful, competing in the competition or working with the FBI?
So I'll answer the first part about that is you need to work on self-confidence anywhere and in any part of your life in order to work on your speech, on how you stutter, acceptance, and all of that stuff. It's not, you don't only have to work on your speech. Like, if you work on all parts of your life, they all kind of come together to move you along. And that's what the Ironman was for me. Like, I needed to struggle in another aspect of my life other than every time I tried to speak. And that was huge. Like, learning how to swim. Like, I did not know how to swim, but I taught myself stroke by stroke. And the analogy to stuttering is that you really have to take every opportunity to speak to understand how you stutter, how it impacts you, and keep going. Like, it's everything is an opportunity to improve. It's not like you don't only have to go to speech therapy to work on your speech. And that was a huge outcome that I learned. And, like, I'm all for speech therapy. It helped me a lot to get to where I am. But you also have to work on the things that you want to do to become who you want to be. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
There's definitely something to be said about how that type of holistic approach to self-improvement, I believe that it transcends not only the speech community, but in larger sense, the way that we approach any types of afflictions, which I know is the term that you mentioned a lot in your book, but really to kind of, like, issue a challenge to people who are experiencing a form of adversity and affliction, and how the tools to respond to that are readily available. I know that reading your book, self-acceptance is one of these, like, guiding precepts that I think felt so identifiable when I was reading it, because I think for a lot of people in this room who are still on that journey, because I don't believe that self-acceptance is just a linear point that you achieve.
Mm-hmm.
What has been sort of your reflection, looking back at, the most deep-seated childhood traumas to the experiences and the high stress experiences that you went through in regards to self-acceptance, and what advice do you want to impart for people today looking at kind of the onset of your journey?
so that's a big question, because acceptance in the community is a huge idea, and that was part of the reason I wanted to write, is I didn't understand what acceptance actually is or was. Like, how do you achieve that? What are the steps that allow you to approach it? All of those things. And I would say just start taking any steps, anything that you want to do, try it. The problem I had is that I never tried anything. I just kind of went through life like wanting to have all the things that I thought I couldn't have because of how I spoke. And when I started to do the Ironman, like everything kind of opened up. And then at work, I took a lot of risks in that aspect of my life, and my relationships, and I saw what happened. I saw things open up, and all of a sudden I was in the life that I thought was impossible to have. So I guess it's the willingness to allow your life to happen and to take the steps towards the things that you want to do and see where you end up, because it won't be where you imagined it would be.
The way that I had always, the feeling that I've experienced from reading your book reminded me of a lot of other sort of, contemplative and thoughtful novels in the vein of like, When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chandran, to even The Four Things That Matter Most by Ira Byock. And there is sort of this guiding precept which is built around the idea that people from any point in their life can jump into this type of literature and find something that resonates. I'm speaking primarily to people who are younger, people on their journey, to even people who are older. There is something about that experience that you have detailed. And I think what I really want to give you credit for, Chris, is that you don't shy away from the ugliness. You don't shy away from the discomforts and the perils that came with your individual experience. I think because you lean so much into that, there is this beauty of the universality of it. And on that note, I'd love to know kind of, in terms of something that has been a part of your life, what was the role of like the NSA in terms of coming into your life at a certain pivotal time, as well as the way that you kind of like showed love back, and like how important is that for you today?
The NSA was one of the turning points in that I hit a pretty hard rock bottom and I didn't have anywhere to go. And for some reason, I looked up the local NSA chapter, attended the meeting, and at the meeting, I tell the story in the book, but the leader at the end of it handed me a business card for his therapist, and it happened to be Vivian Iskin, and I was like, I can't go to therapy again. Like I've had enough. so I kept at it with the NSA, and eventually got into therapy with her. And then I attended my first conference in Arizona, and I was blown away by all the people there and the whole experience. Like I was immediately involved in the workshops. I was on panel, and I just took it all in. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced, and to be around that many people kind of accelerated the journey for me. Like that was the impact that it had. Like it's one of the most important parts of the story.
Yeah. I think that attending a conference of any size at the NSA is like, it accelerates compassion. And that's a feeling that I got when I was reading your book. And even during the really tough and really strenuous parts, there was that feeling of, let's not shy away from the difficulty, because that can be a part of our liberation sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to know, Chris, what's your personal hope that people from all walks of life will get out of reading your book?
The aim was to eliminate the uncertainty of what it's like to live with a stutter. I mean, for me, that was the hardest part, like not having any hope for the future, being like, man, if I continue this into the future, like I'm not going to make it. Like, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to find a wife? Like school, like all of that stuff is just impossible to understand how you make it through it all. And the aim is to talk about that. And it's a hard thing to talk about, because there's the whole idea that everyone has their own experience. And while I agree with that, there's also the part about we all experience the stages in life, school, interviews, relationships. And I wanted to put that out there as a, like, everyone who reads this isn't alone or the first person to experience it, because like we're told that we are experiencing it in our own ways. And that kind of led me to believe that I had to find my own way, like that I was going to be the only one to take the route that I took. And I didn't want anyone else to ever have to feel that way.
It is truly a book for all seasons and for all walks of life too. So I think there is a everydayness and a relatability that, Chris, you should be very proud and really encouraged by and really empowered by in regards to how this book has been perceived. And for those of us in this chat today who have gotten a chance to read it already, to those that have already heard the reviews, just like on behalf of the NSA, just such a huge congratulations for showing the courage to express yourself in this way and to have like a tangible document of this time in your life. By now, you guys are probably tired of hearing my voice, so I'd like to, well, you still will, because I'll be reading the Q&As, but in the last 15 minutes of our conversation, I'd like to open it up to the people in this Q&A to start typing any questions that you have for Chris in regards to his book and his story. We'd like to give this opportunity to our community to connect with our featured speaker today. So if you're to like put your responses in the chat, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. What advice do you have for people who want to self-publish their books? I know this was a new experience for you, but I'd love to hear sort of like in the self-help generation and the way that like this industry works these days. What's one of the most important things that you learned from your time?
It's extremely easy. Like it's easier than I ever thought it would be. Like I just had to upload the PDF to Amazon and they took care of everything. Like it really is an easy experience. Like the hardest part was the writing, and I'm happy that I was able to do it all on my own.
Yeah. We had a question from Andrea asking, is the book available for hard copy or just an ebook?
I have hard copy, paperback, ebook, and I also I'll have an audiobook here soon, in a few weeks. It's almost all done.
Yeah, covering all the bases.
Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah. I read my version via ebook, so trying to represent the Kindles out there. Okay, we got some questions coming in. We have one here from Alan. He asks, what are some ways you continue to confront your own challenging, feared speaking situations?
I have a really stressful job, and I have an opportunity almost every day to do something that is hard or that I would never have tried in the past. And that's part of what has helped me a lot, is that I've had a lot of hard opportunities, like an unbelievable amount of them. And I think that's helped me understand how to approach them and to work through them.
That's very impactful. We got a question from Carl that reads, Chris, did you ever face overt discrimination throughout your career in the US government? If so, how did you manage to overcome and face those obstacles?
Yes, a lot. I think the main one, and it's in the book, was well, almost all of it is in the book because I had to leave a lot of it out, was I interviewed to be an FBI agent and made it all the way to the end of the process, and they expressed to me that they wanted to offer me the job, but I didn't pass the interview at the end. I had a real hard time, and it was awful. However, afterwards, the recruiter asked me if I wanted to interview again, and because they wanted to offer me the job. And she said, can you come back on a day when you don't stutter as much? And there was an exchange about that I'm not too happy about. But I never answered her. I never talked to her again. And at that point, I was in the middle of a lot of things happening in my life, and moved on to a lot better of a job than that. So yeah, I mean, it's always there, but you really have to weigh how much of it you want to accept to work there.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, for many of us who don't have positions in government, there is always a, real assumption about the level of stress and the level of intensity that comes at those higher positions. So again, that's another just component of really how amazed I am by your resilience to be in those environments and rolling with the punches in the way that you did, that you describe, vividly in your book. We have a question from Pam that reads, Chris, is there anything surprising you learned about yourself during this process?
Yeah, actually, and it's the last chapter in the book, about what I was really after all my life. Like, it wasn't actually to work on my speech, it was to have the ability to make connections with others.
Mm-hmm.
And by that is learning how to be social, like how to interact people, and how to work with my stuttering and to use it to my advantage to connect with others. And I'm amazed at how far I was able to progress in that aspect. And also, I mean, that's the area that I have to work on the most at the moment. And I never understood that as like the aim of acceptance, is that, I learned how to be alone, how to isolate myself all those years, and having to unlearn that and to learn how to be social. I mean, that's an amazing thing to do.
It is. And it's also like proof that your book is, obviously covers a lot about the experience of stutterers, but there could be an argument made that it's also just a book about life advice in terms of really sincere ways of looking at, in a very contemporary lens too, how we experience trauma and the ways to navigate it, like in the world that we live in. We have a question from Jeff that reads, Chris, what made you decide to do the audiobook yourself as a person who stutters? Because that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I wanted it to be in my voice. I didn't want to hand off the story and all of that to anybody. And the recording was hard. It was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. And I'm excited to share it, but also it allows people to experience the variability of stuttering, in that throughout the recording, there are hundreds of different ways that I stutter, and my story still is able to come across. And
exactly,
for people interested in hearing it, it's more than an opportunity to hear the story. It's an opportunity to hear the experience.
Yeah, and it registers on a really deep level.
Yeah.
This is a question from Dylan. He asks, how large of a role did fluent advocates play in your story?
The first 25 years of my life. All the therapy I had over the years was all fluency shaping, and it was not for me. I had a pattern that was all blocks, and I couldn't really say anything other than a few words, and that was it. But I think having the option to work on things other than how it sounds, I really embraced the avoidance. Reduction in that I was allowed to stutter. Like that was the whole point. And once I had that, I left all the fluency efforts in the past.
This was more of like a logistical question, but I want to ask, like, how long did it take you to write the book, like from start to finish? Even if you picked it up for a little bit, did a little bit here and there, like in total, how long was the experience?
Like a year and a half, I bet. And like, I probably spent almost a year on turning it into a book. Like I had all the writing, I just had to make it into a draft. Yeah. That's
pretty good. You're not like George R.R. Martin over here spending like 2 decades trying to finish on, a Game of Thrones novel. So
no. And I had all the stories I needed. Like
exactly.
As you know, like we experience things a lot differently than a lot of people. And I wanted to show that in the stories.
Yeah. Mary asks Chris if you ever worked with a Dr. Gerald McGuire in California at any point during your time.
No.
Okay, gotcha. Let's see. We have a question from Lee who asks you mentioned hitting a low point in attending an NSA meeting. How important do you think it is to get connected with others who share a condition moving forward in your life?
It's the most important part of the journey, like to be able to watch other people and everything that they do and how they talk and how they interact. Like it really opened my eyes to the possibility that I could do that as well. And I try to be around other people who stutter as often as I can.
Including today.
Yeah.
We have a question that asks, what was the most emotional thing that you wrote in your book that just really came from the most sincere place?
There's actually a part at the end that I don't want to spoil, but as I recorded it in the audiobook, I was crying, just like on my own. Like I was crying through the script, and like it was the first time that happened, but it was really kind of out of my control. Like I was in the moment, I was in the story, and it didn't even have anything to do with stuttering. Like that's the whole thing, is that like, I am as honest in the book as I could be, and I want the reader to feel the story. and I felt it. I was crying, crying while I was reading, and it was a moment that was incredibly hard to work through. Yeah.
You had a real human moment. And
Yeah.
I think that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I think that feeling and that sentiment is such a great place to kind of cap off this really compelling and deeply thoughtful conversation that we've had today, Chris. You've created a story that really transcends our condition and taps into something that's deeply human and vulnerable. And I think that the audience that it has the potential of reaching is vast. And we're very lucky to kind of have you at this onset as you've been a part of this experience with us, and for obviously supporting the NSA as we support you right back. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your story and just being vulnerable with us. So for everyone who stayed on, thank you again for tuning in and sharing a lot of these really compelling questions as well. That concludes this town hall / Q&A interview with Chris. And if you haven't grabbed a copy already, be sure to check out Every Waking Moment, available where all books are sold. And Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
See you all very soon. Have a good rest of your day.